Listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. What's happening, everybody? Hopefully you're doing okay in this very tenuous world that we live in. Doesn't it feel bizarre to be alive and stuff? I'm struggling a lot in regards to the velocity in which not only news comes your direction, but just like the flip-flopping that you have to do where you hear about something terrible either in the world or something that happened to somebody you love or whatever, and then you got to go to like work or like, smile at somebody. It's just, whatever. The challenges of life. But that is why we love music, and that is why we love independent music. Not only is it an escape, but it's a place to find community, and that is why this podcast exists. Because of punk, hardcore, indie rock, emo, metal, whatever genre you celebrate, as long as it's of the DIY variety, that is what we focus on here. And today is a great conversation because I get to speak to a booking agent. I love having people in the industry on this show because, they just give a point of view that I think many people who are just casual consumers of music or occasionally go to shows don't get a lot of visibility into. So I have Troy Lusk from Peachy, his agency. He founded this thing, I don't know exactly how many years ago, but we'll call it 3 to 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer. But Troy is a great supporter of this podcast, and I wanted to have him on. He books bands like Scowl and Gleamer and Indit, and he also has a lot of other cool bands on his roster. You can go to tourpeachy.com, and you can see the full lineup of bands. But what I find so cool about booking agents is they really do love the game. And when I say the game, I mean music. Like they approach it from a very, organic or authentic place. Like not every booking agent does, but it usually comes from the idea of like, hey, I put on a local show, or, I traveled with my friend's band and I saw what a local show promoter does, or it's just a little nugget of information sticks in a person's brain and then they just can't get it out of their brain. And they focus on that and they try to figure out different avenues in order to approach booking. Some people just are show promoters. Some people, like Troy, are booking agents, and it's just a cool world. So anyways, Troy was a great discussion, and I'll bring you that in a moment, but you can support the show easily by sharing the stuff on social media, whether it's just episodes and being I like this thing or whatever. Appreciate all of that. You can also leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast page, or just leave a simple rating on Spotify. All of those things help out. And I know you hear about it on every podcast you listen to, but if you took just 5 seconds to throw some love my general direction, I would appreciate that. Please. Because truthfully, it's like, I think some statistic, it's like less than 2% of an audience of a particular podcast contributes in that way. So it's like, man, if you are that 2%, I commend you. And if I knew it was you, then I would hug you. But I can't and I won't, because I, wouldn't do that to you, make you feel uncomfortable. But regardless, appreciate that immensely. You can also reach out to me individually via email, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. That's the number 100. Love to hear any feedback, concerns, questions, future guests, whatever the case may be. Love to have that dialogue. And also, I'm continuing on the tradition of recommending music, whether it's new, old, new to me, old to you, doesn't necessarily matter. I have a link in the show notes in which you will be able to listen to the cumulative playlist on Spotify of all the things that I've been tripping across and recommending on a week-to-week basis. So hopefully you find something new and interesting in there, and you can follow along however you see fit on there. But I'm going to recommend a band that just recently came back on my radar after kind of like, I don't know, just like sort of hanging around. A Great Big Pile of Leaves. If you're not familiar with the band, they were formed in Brooklyn, probably like, I don't know, like mid 2000s or so. They put out a record that I fell in love with and I thought was really cool, but I just hadn't revisited. So this record came out in 2013 on Top Shelf Records. It's called You're Always on My Mind. It's this really interesting mixture of like indie rock, a little emo, a little Midwest emo, but they combine all of this in a very interesting stew. And I forgot about the band, like I said, for many years. And then was talking to some friends, and the name got dropped on me that it was one of their favorite bands. And I was like, you know what? I haven't listened to them in a long time. And then I listened to the record. I'm like, my gosh, what was I doing? Let me rinse this for like a week. And I have been. So listen to A Great Big Pile of Leaves. You're always on my mind. And like I said, it's on a playlist, and you can find a link in the show notes. Let's talk to Troy Lusk from Tour Peachy. He is very passionate about helping bands and passionate about music in general. And I love having people like him on who are the behind the scenes, making the things happen, getting bands to your particular town and helping them try to make a living out of this art thing. It's not easy, guys. Let's be honest. It's not easy at all. So the fact that a person like Troy and many other people behind the scenes in the music industry are making it happen. So without further ado, even though that's what everybody says. So maybe without further pause, here we go. Yeah, that's it. Without further pause, Troy from Tour Peachy. Giving booking agents flowers, so to speak, because like we were talking about before we started to record, I think most people have a conception of obviously what booking agents do and understanding like how touring sort of works. But this isn't to blow smoke up your butt, but like booking shows is like one of the most thankless jobs. Like there's no one no one pays attention to it unless like something goes wrong, and then like, fingers point in all different directions. But then on top of it, like the the artists are obviously thankful and appreciative, but at the same time they're just like, yeah, oh, we'd be doing this regardless. And it's like, well, no, like I'm helping you achieve your dreams or whatever. Anyways, all that to say, and we'll pull apart different themes as we go through. But when you got attracted to kind of like putting stuff together that you obviously are not the quote unquote center of attention, so to speak, not saying that that's everybody, they want to be the center of attention, but what drew you to kind of the, booking side of things and like putting things together that you weren't necessarily going to get, a pat in the back for?
Yeah. I mean, becoming a booking agent kind of just fell into my lap. I had two passions between sports and music throughout my childhood that I found quickly that I wasn't going to make a career in sports. And so I found music, um, you know, 10, 11, 12 years old. And then through high school, it became a huge influence on me. Um, the punk stuff, growing up in Huntington Beach, you're well aware of Chain Reaction. And at that time in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was thriving with that scene. And so I very much got into that. And music kind of just took over, and I knew I wanted to work in music. I didn't have a specific lane. I had heard the titles manager, label executive. I was probably least familiar with booking agent. Um, but so I pursued that avenue of getting my foot in the door in the music industry. I landed a handful of internships, and then I toured for 5 years, as a merch manager, as a stage manager, and then as a tour manager. And over those 5 years, learned the ins and outs of touring. And then the band I toured with called it quits. And I was at the time kind of looking for an out myself. I was like, man, road life, I can't do it for the rest of my life. Um, and so I went back to school. I went to college. I knocked out a degree. And then when I did, that was the only time I had ever been good at school, was when I went back to college, because I had a purpose. My I was the guy that was like just skating by, like just C's, get degrees, get me through a high school, get me through high school, and let me pursue some sort of entrepreneurial career per se. And so yeah, I Um, Knocked that out, and then started looking for careers or jobs really open-mindedly in the music industry. And I connected with an agent who I didn't know specifically, but we had common people that we knew. JJ Kasiri at the time. He was at Circle Talent Agency. He had moved over from the agency group to Circle Talent Agency to lead a newly developed live music department there. And I landed an assistant job there. And my approach was, this is another step in the right direction of a career. And I'm the type of person that I enjoy learning. I like to grow in what I do. I strive to be arguably the best in what I do. And so I took that approach of like, hey, I'll do the assistant work, learn what this is all about, and it'll lead me to where it goes or where it doesn't go. And I quickly would like to believe that as I started to thrive. I learned the ins and outs. I was given an opportunity to start signing bands after a short amount of time. Bless the independent agency lifestyle rather than,
Yeah.
where you may sit around for 5 to 10 years without ever a promotion. Given that opportunity, signed bands. Again, I'd like to think my ear for identifying talent led me to a handful of good signings out of the gates, and I never looked back. And here I am 10 years later, an agent, a founder of an agency, and we're here talking.
Yeah. Well, it takes a certain type of person to, want to be in the weeds, like for two reasons of what you're talking about. One is in the weeds in regards to finding bands and like working with artists where you're like, you know what, like I hear something that's cool. People need to be aware of it. And I'm going to work hard at this. Like that not everybody's instinct is like that. And then on top of it, the aspect of what you're talking about, the behind the scenes, whether it's the touring aspect that you experienced, was that, I guess, were those like two modes like relatively easy for you to kind of like step into because you weren't, I guess, concerned about the fact that there were, like that credit was going to be given to you. You're just like, no, I'm here to do a job. I'm here to help you do your job as well.
Yeah, I always like to think that I'm the type of person that enjoys helping others achieve. Um, and the journey that we go on together, that's what I enjoy. Um, and yeah, so I loved finding new bands. I always loved um amongst my friend group, the music that we were listening to. It always seemed to me to be the underground stuff. I'd be first on, like, oh my god, heard this, band that just came out with their first song. Or I was the guy to discover and share amongst my community of friends. And so I love the A&R aspect, and I think that was hugely influential at the start of my agenting career and signing bands. Was just simply being able to have that passion for discovering and getting really excited about, holy shit, that song is awesome.
Yeah. Everybody needs to hear this. Yeah. And truthfully, I'm sure you experienced this as well. And probably advice was levied towards you where it's like, you have to be able to separate like fandom versus the business aspect. And, I think some people do that very well. Others are just in pursuit of one or the other, and usually at the cost of one, clearly. This was a question I was going to ask later, but it seems to dovetail well. Where how have you kind of followed that? Being able to decide where it's like, okay, I listen to this. I think it's cool. It might not be the music that I listen to, but like it makes sense amongst the bands that I'm picking up and all that sort of stuff versus like a pure business decision or just a pure artistic decision. How do you sort those out? Because I know it's not an easy thing to be able to sort out.
Sure. I've always naturally leaned, towards a business mentality at the end of the day. In the bands that I played in, I always took on that business role in the band. Um, and I'm able to compartmentalize the I really like this band or this song is great to translate into I'm running a business, whether it's an agent, I'm an agent at an agency or a founder at Peachy, an agency, being able to compartmentalize, is this investment good for the company or good for me as an agent? I have to be able to foresee that this is going to be a money earner at the end of the day. Otherwise, it's arguably not a savvy business decision, you know. And the truth is, I think that you have to learn over time. You learn to identify certain things within artists that make you believe that this is going to be a good investment, that they are going to, and you rely on. I try, because there's so, in today's day and age in the music industry, I believe it's really accessible and arguably easy to record a really great song. you know there's polished songs everywhere, which allows you to, me, I really have focused on the live aspect. I rely on, hey, does an audience care? Is there a fan base that's growing? Is this artist creating an excitement and a buzz in their hometown, in their community? Have they sold out? Back in the day, the chain reactions, have they, are they, if they're from San Diego, have they sold out Soma Side Stage? And to that, if they are doing that, I believe agents that are out there looking to discover new artists are going to find you, because I do talk to promoters every day, and oftentimes I rely on them because they arguably are dialed into the local scene, the most, so call up promoter X in Phoenix, Arizona, and, hey, what's going on there? Who's selling out your local, small clubs and theaters? And because, again, I'm in the business of artists selling tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I mean, you can mention Psycho Steve by name at the Rebel Lounge. It's fine. Just kidding.
He's someone. Have you had him on here?
I honestly, I have not, and that is a person that, well, actually, no, I had him on when he started the Save Our Stages stuff, and he was part of that. So yeah, I had him on, but yeah, incredible dude. Like, people like him and many others across, North America in general, that like are lifers, where you're just like, I am so glad that you're putting on shows still, and you know what you're doing, and like, you're so like, and to your point of just like the business mindedness, where it's like, hey, I'm putting on this show that like I don't have any connection to, like, musically, like I would never put on the record or whatever, but I understand why it's important, not only from a business perspective, but this is literally what the youth are listening to or whatever.
Definitely. Well, I was curious if you had Steve, because that episode would be 2 to 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours.
It's true. We kept it. Steve, yeah, I do too. Yeah, we definitely kept it specific to. Obviously, this is when the pandemic was happening, so being like trying to save local independent venues and stuff like that. So that was clearly a passion project of his that he was contributing to. But yeah, it's it. I am very grateful for. It's just like anytime where it's like I look at my experience of playing shows and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, call Dave in Montreal, which obviously anybody that's ever booked a show, like, clearly books with Dave Boucher. But it's like, I just am so happy that I'm like, 20 years later, I could be like, I just call up Dave and he can probably give me a show. It's just like, it's great. These are salt of the earth people. But putting the focus on you, I know you said that obviously you grew up in Southern California, and your experience in finding, independent music, I'm guessing was that merely through, friends and your friend group in high school, or how did you get kind of introduced to independent music in general?
Just, wow. Haven't thought about that in a minute. I mean, it really starting to go to shows. Actually, I would say looking back on it, I started playing music. I picked up, I had a drum kit first, and then I picked up the bass, and I had a nucleus of friends, like freshman year of high school that were interested in music, and we started playing a little bit, and that really led to us starting to go to more shows. Um, and y- uh, that going to shows, the local showcases, those shows, and then you just find, we found more friends within the music community that were playing, that were in bands, that led us to more shows, and it just and at that age, punk music, the expression that bands were able to give through their music, and really, I'm a big lyrics person. I love to read the back catalog of the song lyrics, and I listen very closely because I, I love storytelling at the end of the day, and that's, a song to me, lyrically, is a story being told, and or certainly at least emotions being expressed. And a lot of I found the punk stuff very relatable at that time of my life. And so, found one band that led me to the next band, and I was engulfed in it.
Hmm. What was the particular flavor of stuff that you were getting into? Like, I mean, because everybody has their, like gateway bands, whether it's, punk, hardcore, whatever. What were some of the earlier bands that you were, going to shows or listening to that really, opened your eyes up?
Hands down, I would say the most influential band for me was Thrice. Identity Crisis, the first release was huge. It was one of the first. I went to a free show at Cal State Fullerton, which I coincidentally graduated from a few 10 years later. I think that was in 2004. I saw Thrice perform a free show at lunch at Cal State Fullerton. And Identity Crisis was like, holy shit, this is like the mix of everything that I've been looking for. And not only grew my fandom, and enjoyment for Thrice only grew when they put out Illusion of Safety. I mean, I'm like, holy shit. Like, now I thought
This is
Identity
it.
Crisis was like the mix. This is the mix. And
Yeah,
obviously a lot of, labels and everyone thought the same because, they grew into what they are now. And certainly in those like 2004 to 2010 timeframe, like, so that band is hugely influential. And then on the more pop punk side, I really got into Newfound Glory, self-titled, and even the demos before that. Um, those two bands I will always pinpoint as like the pop punk realm. To I've never been able to really say what genre Thrice fits in most, because they
yep,
are, from a prog to a punk to a hardcore to a mainstream radio band, like
totally. They throw every spice at it, and I think that's what I mean. Yeah, like that Southern California and Thrice, like the stranglehold that they had on kids' attention towards them as a band, but something I always admired about them as well is like they showed their influences on their sleeve. Like each individual member brought forth the fact that like, hey, we want to rip off Botch here, and like, hey, we want to rip off what, and like they had no bones about it, which was great because for people like you and I, like we would be able to decipher their influences and get into bands based off of whatever they were into. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, where it's like, oh yeah, like they were the Rosetta Stone for me to be able to be like, oh, I'll get into that, like Casket Lottery, what's that about, and like all of that can just transpire, and like you need a band to be able to usher you into different sounds, and that's to your point. That's what makes them so hard to be classified, because it's just like, what are they? Well, they're like a rock adjacent band, I guess.
Right.
You know what's great? Our partners in evilgreed.net. And they're our partners because they are an amazing web store solution for bands and record labels of all shapes and sizes, but specifically focusing in on cool, artistic, heavy stuff. That is the label that I have put on them. And they sort of wear that. They call it heavy music merchandise and records. But go to evilgreed.net because the website will not only impress you, but the sort of bands that they work with, whether it's End It, Scalp, Modern Life is War, Knocked Loose, Drain, Blood Incantation, Spectral Wound. You listen to this show most likely because you like aggressive and or heavy music, and you will love the offerings that evilgreed.net has. They're based in Berlin, Germany, but they ship worldwide and they get to you here in America very fast. I've ordered from them before. I've got stuff in like 9 to 10 days here in California. They also have exclusive colors of vinyl, like Brutus, one of my favorite bands around right now. They just put out a collection of their first 7 inches, and Evil Greed has an exclusive color. One of them sold out right away. That's neither here nor there, but that's the sort of stuff that Evil Greed comes to the table with, and I love them for it. So you will love what they have going on because you're listening to the show. You like aggressive music. There's no reason that you can't shop on evilgreed.net. Enjoy what they have and buy a bunch of stuff for me. Maybe just throw me a t-shirt. Maybe. No. Okay. Well, just keep it yourself and that's fine. evilgreed.net. Go visit now. Sports are obviously a big part of your life. Like I know you mentioned, and it became clear that you're like, okay, I'm not going to be a professional human being when it comes to sports. But what were you cutting your teeth into? Were you baseball, basketball? What were you doing?
I really grew up on baseball, basketball, and football. I played all 3 of those sports basically from the starting age of any of those leagues through high school. And yeah, I'm naturally a competitive person. Not to like an extreme that like I'm playing adult leagues now and getting in fights,
Yeah.
but I like to win, and I love a team aspect. In basketball I played point guard, and point guards are naturally the ones maybe considered the leader on the court, an extra coach per se. And so I always took on the point guard responsibilities in basketball. I then coached at the high school that I graduated from in Huntington Beach. And I really I enjoyed teaching, coaching, leading, and I think that translates into how I lead toward Peachy. I'm so passionate, committed, invested in growing, the team that we've assembled at Tour Peachy, finding opportunities for them to grow, first identifying, where they want to go. And then again, circling back to where we started, helping them achieve, what they want, where they want to go, and the title that they want to be in. And that also is how I work with clients. It's I I try to position myself secondary. I feel like we're in the business of serving. Um, so I service my clients and their desires, their goals, and I try to identify those from the start so that, I can actively try to achieve those for them.
Yeah. You're giving out assists, man. That's what you're doing,
I love it.
Dishing dimes all day long, baby. You're like, Troy, pass to me. No problem. I got you. Take that corner 3.
Assist leader. And
Yeah.
do they have assist? Do they have stats in agenting world?
Yeah, I think I mean, you could probably be able to, come up with some metric where it's just like, oh yes, like maybe my band isn't headlining, but we're support and I got the assist on that one, like,
Shall we
yeah.
go into business together and create, this company that does stats for agents?
I mean, we could build up a makeshift Sloan conference for diving into the analytics of, all the music. I did at one point, like one of my friends, we were definitely talking about trying to like fantasy sports a fantasy sports element on music and bands, of coming up with like ways that you could like bet on bands, like not real money, but just being like, oh, I'm going to draft, Knocked Loose this year. It just like, I'm like, that would be fun, but there's so many moving parts that like we just, couldn't come up with it. So, but it sounds like we can iterate on that. So we'll do that off mic.
There we go.
So you played in a band yourself. Were you playing drums? What were you doing?
I played bass in a band, and then I became the front man.
Okay.
We were let's throw us into the screamo category genre. I certainly can't sing. I learned, so I was better at screaming.
Sure. You definitely played shows at the Alley in Fullerton, California, most likely.
Oh, definitely. As well as do you recall the train place? It was like an outdoor patio in Fullerton where the train came by, and it would come like mid-set.
Oh yeah, it was the slide bar, right? That was
It wasn't called the slide bar. I'm familiar with the slide bar. It was called something else. It was like a coffee bar or lounge or something.
Right, the hub is what it was called. Like, I mean, it literally right next door to the slide bar was the like coffee shop. I mean, I remember going to shows there in like, late 90s or whatever, and it was usually just like indie rock stuff. I do remember seeing. No, Get Up Kids didn't play there. But anyways, point being is that yes, like you identify the time frame, and I'm like, oh yes, if you sounded like that, you had to have played at that venue.
Yeah, definitely.
What so like you said, you kind of took the mantle of being, and I'm using air quotes here, like the business person of that band, like booking shows and, kind of getting into the nitty gritty of like what it takes to get a band from a garage to actually playing shows. Did you, you obviously enjoyed it because you're doing it now as a career, but like, did you find kind of a strength at that? Because like not everybody gets attracted to like, hey, book a show. And most people are like, no, I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, I think it just, I was the person that just did that. I've always
did it.
I think I'm the person that just does it, and I think that's the DIY mentality, right? It's like, do it yourself. Like no one else is going to do it. I'm going to do it. Or just because I'm doing it, no one else is doing it in the band. But yeah, no, I took on that responsibility, and, I would build the promoter artist relationships. I'd get us the shows. I'd settle the shows if we were getting paid at that time.
Sure.
Yeah, I would handle all of that. Out of, it was a very small level, but it was an introduction of how this works. So yeah, I would take that on, and I enjoy the responsibility of handling careers for, whether it was my band at that time at that level, or the responsibility of having a client that is doing major festivals and small sheds and amphitheaters, or I don't take that lightly. I really understand the magnitude and the love that they have for their band that they've created. And I really take the appreciative, grateful approach to be a part of that. And I'm hopeful, and I feel through my experience that that's been reciprocated in the most successful client agent, relationships thus far in my career.
Yeah. And as stupid and basic as that sounds, I'm glad you said that, like, just the thankfulness and gratefulness, because I'm sure that there are many times where when a person says like, thank you for something, of just like either getting information or whatever, you're almost like stopped in your tracks. Cause you're just like, oh, you're welcome. Like I don't know why. It just seems like such a revolutionary act, whether it's in music or just in life in general, when people like stop and like genuinely not just like, oh, thanks, sort of, and like just moving on. It's like, it's great that you're approaching it with that mentality where it's just like, oh, I'm thanking people just as much as like I'm helping them. I'm just like, hey, thanks. I'm glad I'm a part of this.
Most definitely. It's a cutthroat, uber competitive industry that we work in. And I think people run with that notion and have their guard up a lot of the times. And alternatively, I try to take that approach of like, hey, I'm trying to build lifelong relationships that, certainly will benefit my business, but benefit, the clients that choose me as their agent, their careers. I look at it that way, and I, I'm very strategic. I'd like to think that I'm very strategic in relationship building and communication amongst team, um, and want to exude that. Hey, I'm very grateful that I'm a part of what you've created essentially. But also, I'm hopeful that the artist team, is appreciative of me and the agency as well, you know? And that to me is the recipe for the most success. And uh it's interesting. I like that. The question of like what defines your success, right? Because a lot of people have different opinions on that. What is yours, Ray?
Yeah. What defines success for me? Truthfully, the North Star that I've always looked at mostly from a professional perspective, is like, do I get to work with people who I like, and do I get to work with something I'm passionate about? And like, to me, if I'm ticking off both those boxes, I'm like, great, man. Like, we're along for the ride. Like, yes, of course, if I'm compensated, great. Like, because that's
Yeah.
clearly a survival thing that we all need. But if I'm satisfying those first two areas, then I am, by your question, successful, and like everything else will hopefully fall into place beyond that.
Yeah. Well, similar in that sentiment. Yeah, a lot of focus is on money, and that is arguably the priority with business. But there are ways. My belief is there are ways to supplement that and also prioritize what I define as success, and that's building lifelong relationships that are um, that bring joy to your life. um,
Yeah.
because man, it can be tough working in this industry.
Sure. Well, and especially to that point, like there are people that I mean, everybody has like terrible coworkers or whatever, be like, oh my gosh. And it's like in the music industry, that's definitely, there are people you have to work with for one reason or another. Cause it's like, oh, they're, a manager of this band. I don't really like the manager. The band's great. We got to talk to him or whatever. But, there's a little more mobility within the music industry to be like, if this promoter is terrible with, and everybody is kind of like, don't work with them anymore, then, no one talks to them anymore. And so there is a little bit of a choice of being able to be like, oh, yes, like if I don't want to work with that person, and where you're sitting making the decisions for your agency, if you get a bad vibe from a band, you're just like, oh, yeah, we're not going to work with them. We're not going to book you. Sorry.
Well, yeah, and there are that that circles back to touching on putting ourselves secondary, or as I reference agent, to what is best for the client. It's like, hey, I don't have. I don't necessarily like this person, but I have to work with them for my client's best interests. And so that is, I think, identifying. I can use the word chameleon in the sense of, I truly try to understand people, because I think that allows me to be better at my job for my clients. And so, trying to understand who this person is that I'm talking to, because everyone is different, and not everyone wants to be your friend in this industry. They simply are here for business. That's fine as well, totally. But if I identify that and it's like, hey, we're not going to be buddies, but we can do business together. Absolutely. Then that's fine. But I think that is, for agents, it's a good characteristic to have, is to be able to, because communication is a large part of our business. And being able to communicate and have respect, demand respect, to get business done is key.
Absolutely. When you mentioned that you spent time on the road, working in different capacities, and then understanding that the road life was not for you long term, I guess, what was it that you learned about yourself on the road that, made you decide where it's like, maybe being out for 200 shows a year is not the best, like, not the most soul-filling thing for me. So when did you learn that? And I guess, like, what did you learn about yourself as you were on the road?
It really became when I just terribly missed home, my friends, my network of family. Um, I started not looking forward to touring, whereas I totally did at the start. And I think that translates into a lot of artists experience it in touring. It starts as this, oh my God, we get to travel the world, we get to play shows, meet new people, and you learn, and that is exciting for whatever amount of time it is for that person or that band. But then, it starts to transition into a job. And it's less exciting going to New York for the 27th time, than it was the first time.
Yeah.
So I really, I couldn't imagine myself doing touring at the level that I was and at the extent that I was when I was, at my age now. In my late 30s, going into my 40s and 50s, where you aspire to have a family. And I'm naturally a little bit of a homebody. Um, I just knew that I couldn't do that. So, I needed to transition into some sort of home base, office, something of that sort. But man,
You need
my
to be rooted.
touring, yeah, my touring experience is hugely influential to my agenting. Those 5 years on the road, whether it was just going into the venues that still stand today. I'm familiar with the ins and outs of those venues, what they're like. I can relate to my clients in the sense, hey, I have toured. I know it's tough. We can have, as deep of conversations as you would like to about, mental health on the road, finances of the road, all of those things. So, and I, always am open to any of those conversations with clients to get on that relatable level to, because I do aspire to not be the suit behind a phone agent.
I love merchandise. You know that. I've spoken about it before. And that is why the friends at rockabilly.com are, I feel like I just want to move into their warehouse and broadcast from there, because I think what they do is so important. They sell officially licensed merch from bands of all shapes and sizes, whether you're into hardcore, punk, metal. They have it all, and they have it all under one banner and officially licensed. Like I said, because that way the bands get paid. This is all above board. We're not talking bootleg stuff. And you're ordering off of Amazon, and then you wash it once, and then the design is gone, and you're like, why did I just waste money like that? Terrible, terrible experience. That is why you need to order from rockabilly.com. Use the promo code 100 words or less, 10% off your entire order. And why don't you order the limited edition Atreyu shirt? Or maybe you want to get a sick Alice in Chains shirt. Or maybe you want to get something for a friend or family member. Maybe you want to get comics or pet merch. They have so much stuff, and I love it all. So pretty soon I'll be broadcasting out of the Rockabilly warehouse once I move to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is where they're located. But until then, go to rockabilly.com, use the promo code 100 words or less with the number 100, 10% off your entire order. Go shopping now. I think, and you would be the one to unequivocally speak about this, but touring, in my opinion, has changed drastically in regards to, and when I'm comparing to, late 90s, early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s, where it's like there was this compulsion for bands to have the 250 plus shows a year for years in a row without really having any sort of, it was a hamster wheel effect of being like, I got to do this because everyone else is doing this, so I got to do this. And it seems like now touring has settled in a little bit. There's still some hyperactivity that bands are pressured to feel like they need to be, relevant and seen or whatever. So how do you, your approach definitely is very relational in regards to your bands, where you're like, hey, if you guys don't want to tour, like, I'm clearly not going to send you out there. Like, you're a compassionate human being. Some people aren't, as you well know, within the agent. They're just like, oh yeah, let's just say yes to every tour. So how have you, I guess, kind of balanced that sort of business with, like, obviously actually being a human as well, and like you being open to those conversations? That just obviously comes from like who you are as a person, I'm guessing.
I think it's really the word I'll use is just listening to the artist. Asking the question of how they feel about this opportunity and this time frame of touring. Obviously my job is to guide them through the X's and O's of this offer. Do I believe it's a good opportunity? Do I believe it's a fair value? Do I believe, this is something you should accept, pass on, negotiate, etc. But listening to how they feel about it, and where their heads are at, will certainly, and that, you're aware that if there's management, often is the medium communication, where agent and manager are oftentimes speaking. I don't have direct line of communication with all of my artists, but uh, I believe good managers are able to communicate back, hopefully, the artist's sentiment and feelings on something. But, we've also, in today's day and age, there are often times where we're collectively communicating as a team, where it's my agent, manager, and artist. So I do have the ability to listen directly. But, it's just listening to them and respecting, them. And then, as I feel at the end of the day, my job is done when I've provided everything that they've needed to be put in a position to make a decision. uh, you know, and allow them to make the decision. And if they feel strong about that decision, I respect that. Um,
Right. The
and
facts are on the table. We can have a discussion about this. If you say no, that's fine. We've at least talked about it. You've had all the information, and we'll move on.
yeah, and I don't have to agree, I can disagree. But at the end of the day, I'm not the person that's saying you have to fucking do this. Like,
Right.
or at least I haven't gotten there. I don't, I'm hopeful I don't get there, because again, it's a line of respect,
Mhm.
understanding your position, and, allowing the artist to hopefully control their destiny if they want to have that control. There's always the alternative where a client, an artist, will really want the agent or the manager to make that decision for them. And in that case, I can understand that I'm the decision maker, and I can make decisions, if I'm given that. But I start with, this is your decision. If you want me to make the decision, I will.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It starts with you, but if you want to push it back on me, that is your call, and I can handle it from there.
Sure.
When you first started to, book with JJ and collect your experience and everything like that, I'm not asking you this question to embarrass yourself, or you can even reference, earlier experiences. But I know when you are young, dumb, and just like figuring stuff out. Like you're making mistakes, but those are like the most important mistakes because you clearly learn from them. Um, what are some either mistakes or scenarios that you went through that you're like, oh yes, I still think about this because I'm so glad I made this mistake then. Or it can be a very specific, like, oh, I remember I, lost my shirt at this show or whatever. Like I said, I'm not doing this to embarrass you, but I just always find that instructive when people have that experience of being like, yeah, I still think about this.
Well, I like to think that I care so much about not making mistakes that I've never made a mistake.
I
That
love it. I
is
love it.
absolutely untrue because everyone makes mistakes. At least that's
Absolutely.
my belief.
That's
Um,
that's that's like the job interview question where people it's like, hey, name one weakness about yourself. My weakness is I just care too much. It's not a weak. What are you talking about? Yeah. But I like that. I think I'm gonna use that now where I'm just gonna be like, you know what? Like, yeah, it's a
ah,
perfect response.
there we go.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Thinking, trying to find one example doesn't come to mind. I mean, I've certainly made plenty of mistakes. But I always approach when a mistake is made and I'm aware of that, taking accountability. There's no time for trying to wiggle your way around how, oh my God, did I make that mistake? Are you accusing me of something that I did do? And the defenses get up, oh my God, no, I didn't do it. It's like, no, absolutely. I take responsibility for that mistake. And, I take the approach of I better not do it again. So you
Okay.
got to learn from your mistakes, right? Um, because if what I've learned, now that I do have a team that I'm responsible for, at Tour Peachy, we've grown into, I believe we have 6 employees, there, if you think you're bringing on someone that is going to be not make a mistake, well, you've found Superman,
Totally.
or you're the idiot. um, so I've learned to have grace with mistakes that are made, that are learned from, and I hope that I'm given the same respect from my colleagues, uh, in understanding that, hey, sometimes there are these mistakes made. I know it won't happen again. Um, but man, I am really I'm trying to find something that I can share that was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. And so sometimes it's nothing big. Like I'll just to give you time to think, I'll like something I reflect on so vividly. The show at Chain Reaction I played with the booking agent or now booking agent, but promoter at the time, Ron Martinez, Final Conflict and Crawl Space Booking.
Sure.
He, by the time I was playing shows there, like I'd known him for years, and I remember he was paying me. I mean, $200, whatever, in the Chain Reaction box office, and like I just took it from it was in the envelope, and I just took it and I left. And he stopped me as I was leaving, and he was like, "Ray, count it in front of me." And I was like, "What? Why? Like, I trust you. You're good." And he's like, "The moment you leave the room, like it's your word against mine, and my word will always win." And I was like, "Oh, oh my God." And I mean, I was like 19 when I got that advice. And like, I'm a, grown ass adult. And I still think of that circumstance because I'm like, oh yeah, even if you trust people, like we're humans and we make mistakes. And so, yeah, that's just a little scenario that really sticks out to me where I was like, I made the mistake, but I obviously learned from it.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to money, there's one that I do remember, and it may be the hopefully, I think it's the first and only time I've ever had a client be stiffed for money.
Oh, okay.
And it was in, maybe the first year that I had clients of my own where I was the RA, responsible agent for the artist. They were from Southern California. It was a newer venue or a pretty unestablished venue in Southern California in the Inland Empire that I had no relationship with the promoter. We took the deal. They did the show. They weren't able to settle that night. Promoter X told artist, "Oh yeah, we'll get it to you." I don't know whether he said, we'll send it to the agency or we'll send it to you. But anyways, that money did not get settled that night. And and we never settled the money. It was a, month long battle of phone calls and unreplied to emails and text messages and threats and all that. And it ultimately, the artist never got paid. And, what I took from that is, one, there's a reason for deposits. Two,
Yep.
I encourage any of my clients, if I will make them aware, I will preface that we are going into the show with risk. Again, trying to guide them through a decision to make. This is someone there's no established relationship with. I'm not familiar. All of these things taken into consideration. Do you have a sense of whether you would like to do this or not, given what I've shared here? I will do everything in my power to make sure that we have, you will get paid, but there's a little bit of gray area here. And so that was the one and only time that I can remember ever having an artist not get paid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, clearly you're always going to remember the venue name. You're going to remember the promoter. You're like, all of these things will never leave my brain because of this, instance where I'm like, oh yes, now I learned all of these things either about myself or the way that I do business, and I need to build from that. So that's good.
Yes.
The a few last things I wanted to hit on was when you stepped out, obviously started tour Peachy, and be able to truly be a viable option for something that is independent but still has credibility, and it's not just a one person shop of being like, oh, I'm working at the local Starbucks and I'll book your West Coast tour or whatever. For you to have the branding, the name, and everything that is what the company is now, had you formulated that, in advance, where it's just like, okay, yeah, I want to come out, even though I may just be one person doing this, I want to look more professional doing this. What was the, I guess, inception point for you wanting to do this on your own with under this moniker?
Well, the pandemic played a huge part of putting, not only myself, but a lot of agents backs against the wall. We were, we weren't able to book concerts, and that led to agencies not being able to retain or hold on to their staff. And so, uh, while I always had the dream vision of running my own shop, leading my own agency, doing my own thing, I can honestly say, without the pandemic putting me up against a wall to have to make tough decisions, I don't know if I would have, And so I was put in a position where I had to make some tough decisions, and you always look back on those things with this. It was a silver lining for me. Bless that pandemic. The one good thing that came out of it,
Yep.
was uh, the ability for me to start what I've started. And I will give credit. Like, I wouldn't have been able to do what I'm doing and starting and founding Tour Peachy without the artists that chose, me at the end of the day. They had trust. They stayed with that transition from major agency to startup. And again, circling back to being grateful and appreciative and all the love in the world and care for my clientele, is like, they choose me they chose me. They continued to choose me, and they continue to choose me moving forward right now. And without my clients, there's no tour Peachy. There's no Troy Lusk as an agent without my artists, without my clients who believe in me. So yeah, I don't take that lightly, and that's why I work, so hard, for my artists. Um, so yeah, a lot of credit to them. Can't do what I'm doing without the artists staying with me. And Tour
Mhm.
Peachy certainly isn't Tour Peachy without our artists. I'm not I'm not the agent that I am without the artists.
Absolutely. And speaking of the artists, like you have, as far as an agency is concerned, a very eclectic roster. Like you definitely don't stick to, and I know most agents have a variety of different, bands, whether it's sticking to, a particular genre or whatever, like that may be their expertise, but then they have bands that obviously sound different. But, looking at your roster is like, sometimes whiplash where it's just like, oh, cool. You book. Oh, I didn't know you booked that as well. Um, was that kind of part and parcel of your own personal music tastes, or is that part and parcel of you just being like, I just like to work with a diverse roster to have different opportunities?
A little of all of it.
Okay.
I think my music taste has always been all over. While it is fairly centric to alternative music, I do I share this on the podcast, but one of my first concerts was like in sync.
Oh, yeah. Why would you not? It's great.
Yeah,
Of course. Yeah.
big JT guy over here.
Okay. That's your guy. I was going to
No,
ask a follow up. Yeah.
but my mom was a big radio music person. And so my childhood, I listened to top 40 radio all the time. So I think that influenced me to be able to identify huge hits. What is popular music? What makes popular music? That was a huge influence. And then, as I started to grow older, the Southern California scene of like Sublime and No Doubt and that stuff started to influence me. And then I got more into the punk stuff, the Bad Religions, the NoFXs, the Pennywises, and then it went into the pop punk stuff, and then into the thrice genre, as we will reference. And then, it's so, yeah, I think I like to define Tour Peachy's roster as a alternative roster. Um, I love to represent artists that I love, music that I love. I also like to think that there's we've been able to create a credibility to identifying new trends, developing scenes. I think my first reference was to when I became an agent, there was the Burger Records scene, which, is, you say that label hesitantly nowadays after what happened, but Burger Records was exploding out of the observatory and having those festivals, and whether whether they were or weren't involved specifically with the label, there were events like that the Frights were participating in, the Garden were participating in. And those were a couple of my first signings. So I was able, the Growlers were exploding out of that. Fiddlar was exploding out of that. So there was that scene that I was able to identify that was what I believed was going to be next, and I was able to grab a couple of those and then further down and develop them for the next few years. But then, I was right around the pandemic, the hardcore scene started to explode, and again, give credit to where credit is due. My at the time booking coordinator Kyle Esbin, he was playing music within the scene, and he was on tour with Scowl, and I met Scowl at playing a bookstore in Denver. like during the pandemic, and was like, oh my God, people were spilling out of the doors. Like, it was 100 sellable capacity, but there were 300 people outside. And that led me to, become more familiar with Ricky Singh, who's doing the Flat Spot Records label. And, we have End It, and we've got Spy. And, we really dug into that hardcore scene. And now, I've worked with Scal for, gosh, it's almost been 5 years, and what a hardworking band they are. I
Yep.
think the first year that I started representing them, we did the most shows I've ever booked in one single year. I don't know what it was, between 100 and 200 shows, but it was like, oh my God, this is
Right.
crazy. Wow, you guys are crazy.
Absolutely.
But I love it. And then more recently, not to give any tip off to any other agents and agencies what's happening, but there's a huge booming scene that almost circles back to like that early 2000s screamo scene out of Southern California. We've recently brought on a new agent, Christian Moreno, who resides in the Inland Empire area, who represents a band, February, without the R, February. And
February. Right.
it's the screamo, it's the emotional, like, screamo. I don't know
Yeah.
what else to really generalize it as, but we've seen that start to explode. And I think that, again, to identify a little bit more of what Tour Peachy is, we really, our bread and butter is the young audience. What are the teenagers listening to? And listening to them, watching them, because they're the future. And,
Absolutely.
Tour Peachy, myself, we want to be around forever. So,
Of course. You want to be doing, you want to, I mean, they completely killed a cliche of Wayne Gretzky. You want to skate where the puck is going to be. It's like, that's like every person wants to be there in some capacity. Some people have, they're thinking, because you want to hit that sweet spot. Like, you don't want to be so far in front. You're like, man, I booked this band 10 years before they really hit. And then they're like, that's not helping anybody. And then you want to obviously not be so behind the curve where you're just like, oh, it seems like I'm following a trend. So yeah, it's trying to find that sweet spot is definitely hard.
Yeah, timing is everything. You learn oftentimes there are agents that signed, whatever huge band it is now, just a year too early, where it was like, oh, you're not getting us anything, and then they go in another direction. And it was like, if I just waited, patience that's a word in my vocabulary that I really try to live by.
Yes, sir, Bob. That was Troy Lusk from Tour Peachy. And just a great dude, great conversation. And hopefully it, got your wheels spinning. Maybe you want to put on your own show. Maybe you want to work in the music industry. Just listen to Troy's story. And then hopefully that, no one can copy anybody else's, life or how they ended up to where they are in life. But Troy's story was hopefully inspiring in some way, shape, or form. Next week, I have a great discussion with Jimmy Stat from Polar Bear Club. And he also plays in a new band that I will mention next week. But Jimmy is an old friend, and I haven't connected with him in probably 10 plus years, if not longer. And Polar Bear Club, they burned so hot and so bright for many years. And then truthfully, I think that not many people are giving them the flowers that, in my opinion, they deserve here in the year of our Lord 2025. So I wanted to talk to Jimmy because I just think I've always loved the band, and I think they're important to remember. Don't just, file them away as being like, oh yeah, that was a band that, hit in the 10s or the 2010s, and then that was kind of it. So that's what I got next week. Jimmy from Polar Bear Club. Until then, please be safe, everybody.